and Fortune to see if he can answer our question, Ron, about how we alert him.
It says meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Yeah, Kitty's apparently in the control room as well.
Thank you for being patient. We're making sure we got all the tech issues worked out. Are you able to hear me all right? Okay.
Yukio, I can hear you on Zoom. Can you hear me? He cannot.
A note just showed up in chat that says raise hands to be recognized.
I'll be helping make sure that you are seen.
Okay.
Kitty and
Yeah.
More people crocheting or knitting.
Yeah.
While they wait.
This is very complicated formulas.
That's what it took to do the budget, you know, what can we say?
Like we're setting up for a rocket launch.
Yeah. You guys are the variables.
What Cam, okay.
That's us there.
We had some troubles last night with this camera. So Larry, let me know when the framing is better.
Yeah, that's a little better, yeah.
Tell me what you need.
Go left. Can you zoom at all?
No.
Then you're fine.
Oh, good.
When they sit down, is
Yep.
too much headroom?
No, yes, but otherwise you'll have too much leg room.
Okay. Okay. Anytime you feel.
All right, well, thank you all for your patience. We've never quite had a meeting like this. Of course, we have hybrid services, but not a hybrid meeting of this size. And we actually have 16 people watching virtually, and I think I counted about 18 or 19 here in the sanctuary. So good morning, everybody. My name is Yukio Okano, and I'm the president of your board of trustees. And it's a beautiful day out, so I really appreciate your spending some time in here for this meeting. So before we start, we're going to light a chalice and have a reading. As you know, Reverend Dana is away from the pulpit today, so I have the honor of doing this. So let's just take a moment of silence to settle in, then I'll light the chalice and have a short reading. So this is a reading from the Reverend Eric Walker Whitstrom. When we light our chalice, everyone focuses on the flame, yet it is the paraffin of the candle, the cotton of the wick, the potassium chlorate and sulfur of the match, and the oxygen in the air around us that makes that flame possible. As leaders, we are not called to be a lone beacon on a hill. Rather, we are meant to work together so that we might together shine. So as many of you know, congregational conversations are held at least twice a year so that the board and the congregation can communicate in a timely way about important church issues. Most of our conversations have been about church finances. At our last meeting in January, we reviewed our mid-year finances for the current church year. And we also gave you a preview of the budget for the coming church year, 2022-2023. So today's meeting will focus on the most recent draft of the 2022-2023 church year. And this is the budget that will start on July 1st of this year. This budget has been developed by the budget team, a subcommittee of the finance committee, and members of the budget team include Sandy Atkins, Sandy, our budget team leader, Ron Dallas, who is watching virtually, and Claudia Silverman. I'm not sure if she's here today.
Her face there.
Oh, she's watching virtually as well. All right, great. So Sandy is going to do the presentation on the proposed budget, and we are having this meeting so that you all have a chance to hear what's being proposed, ask questions, and make comments. The budget has not yet been finalized. The board will meet on May 19th, and we will pay attention to any feedback that comes in today. And then the board will vote on the budget that will be presented to the entire congregation at the annual meeting, which will be on June 12th. So before I turn the meeting over to Sandy, I just want to clarify some housekeeping items. Sandy's willing to take questions as they come up. And because this is a hybrid meeting, we have all of you here and the virtual audience. If you're watching from home, the best way to ask a question or make a comment is through the chat box in Zoom. You can also use the raise your hand option. And I will try to keep track of who's asking questions online. If you happen to be tuning in by phone, and I'm not sure if we have anybody, I'm told that pressing *9 will raise your hand, and pressing *6 will mute and unmute yourself. So *9 to raise your hand, *6 to mute or unmute if you're tuning in by phone. And of course, if you're here in the sanctuary, we do have a microphone here, and you can step up. We can also take that mic off the stand, and if somebody wants to pass it around, that's fine too. Okay, so with that, I'll turn the meeting over to Sandy.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Cool. I can hear myself. I'm not sure everybody knows me, so just a very quick UU biography, so you know that I do know something about budgets. So I have been a UU since 1984, mostly at Troop Church, where I've done absolutely everything from merger committee to president to cooking and all of that kind of stuff. So I know pretty much every aspect of a church. I've also been at the Fullerton Church, the Minnetonka Church, and the Monte Vista Church when we lived in Claremont. So a lot of experience, a lot of choir, which I miss. And also in career, I ran retirement homes for about 15 years, and there's a lot of budgeting to that. And I was also vice president of the board of the Bennettville Pines in line with the theme of the day. So just hope that gives you a little confidence that I know a little something. So I wanted to start, thanks. I wanted to start out with some perspective on what's a budget. So it's a plan for spending responsibly given our expected income. In a church, the first thing we do, Brian led the generosity team and collected all of the pledges and then provided that to the budget team so that we could then incorporate it and plan our spending to be responsible, but also in line with our values. It's also an educated guess based on our experience and what's happening in the world, developing trends. So we know right now investments are going crazy, inflation is who knows where. So there's obviously guesswork in all of this. We don't have bids from all of our providers. We just have to make assumptions about what's going to happen with them. What happens after we approve a budget? Well, the Finance Committee meets every month to review what the expenses have been, to look at the balance sheet. A balance sheet shows us our assets, so that's where we see where our cash position is, for example. And then if there's anything really going awry, then we take corrective action, usually on the expense side. How are we doing so far this year? And I looked up our March, where we are as far as our assets go too. So we budgeted an operating deficit. So we had grants that were not included in that. So our operations, our staff, building, grounds, administration, and all our programs. So our operating deficit or loss for the full year was budgeted to be $89,000. That was our anticipated. But with COVID, we had no idea, how long or short it was going to be in the fiscal year. And so, like I said, a budget is an educated guess, I would say. The income from March through March, so that's 9 months of income, 3/4 of the year, was better than budget by $10,000. So you can see that operating deficit of $89,000, boop, down to $79,000. Expenses are under budget by about $30,000. So our programs aren't spending money as much. We don't have things like aids for the RE program. So that was like $7,600 in our budget. So that was out. And then on top of that, we received $87,000 in grants. Yay, exactly. So we're actually going to be net positive bottom line because of lower spending, little higher income. The higher income was mostly in donations and kind of the unanticipated things that happened. Our current as of March 31st is checking and savings was $287,000. And our total current assets, which includes the checking and savings plus investments, is $495,666. It's so close to $500,000 that, that's more than a 1-year operations. So if nothing came in for a year, we'd still make it. So I'm gonna anticipate and say we still have to budget a deficit, but it's not going to be anything like it was last year. Okay? So the people, again, part of a meeting like this is to instill confidence that you have responsible leaders working on this stuff for you. So the Finance Committee is David Smith, Todd Collert, Ron Dallas, Claudia Silverman, Kathy Swift, Joe Osborne, who just joined us, and then Yukio Okano and Rev Dana join every meeting to stay in touch and to weigh in on what's going on. The budget team is a subcommittee of the Finance Committee, so that's Ron, Claudia, and me. Then the Personnel Committee meets to make recommendations about salaries and benefits. And that this year was, why can't I say, Shelley Sussman, She Sells Seashells, David Henkel, and then I and Reverend Dana were kind of there consulting. I have a lot of personnel background, having run retirement homes, which is all personnel. And then the Generosity Committee, Celia, Mary Kay Lambert, Don Henninger, Brian Buck. So great people doing all of that work ahead of time. So the budget process, again, so you know what's been going on behind the scenes. So the first thing is Claudia writes emails and calls everybody who runs a program in the church to find out what kind of revenue, what kind of expenses they're facing for the year. And it's a combination of dreams and reality usually for that. We didn't get very dreamy with this budget, frankly. We were more, try not to spend too much money than dream big for this year. In a couple of areas, we wanted to dream big, membership, PR, those kinds of things, because we've had a little bit of shrinkage during COVID. So we wanted to keep investing. RE is one of the things that attracts people. So we continue to invest in RE and membership types of things. So then the Personnel Committee meets to agree on recommendations for wage and benefits. The Budget Team and Ron, oh my gosh, Ron Dallas is the most amazing Excel. I thought I was an Excel whiz, but man, I had to sit there and think, what kind of formula was that? Wow. So he set up the spreadsheets, and we tried to make it really simple so that as people gave us numbers, you just pop in the number and it populates all through the spreadsheet so that we don't have to keep on manually entering a number every time there's an update to how much money we've been spending or whatever we're anticipating. Then the generosity team projects the pledge revenue, and we've been getting updates on that all the way through, and budget met with generosity team also. Then the budget team does things like look at all of the expenses for the year, line by line. Each line, what went into it, what's recurring, what's not recurring, all of that. Determine our service contracts and what they're going to be going forward. Look at inflation, the consumer price index, so we get an idea of what it's been in the past year. It's going a little crazy, so what we did was just look at the past year. It may be higher than we budgeted, but you can't go, you know, we'll have to deal with it if it goes higher. And then more information in the spreadsheets as we get more information. And then the Finance Committee reviews all the requests people made, our annualized projections. So we took 9 months of numbers, divided it by 9 to get an average month, and then multiplied it by 12 to see if all things continue as they have for the first 9 months, what's the whole year going to look like? And then they recommend prudent budget that aligns with our values and goals. So in some cases, it's like, some things look like a lot of money, a fairly big increase, but our values are, you know, we have to pay a living wage and the kinds of things that we do as UUs. So there's an average between what's happening and where we live in our hearts and souls. And please raise your hands or ask questions as I go. I love being interrupted because it means somebody was listening. Yes, sir.
My name is Scott. I'm a little bit confused because you said with the budget, you said the grants were 89,000. You had 87,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, microphone? For
Can
Zoom?
anybody not hear me?
No, Zoom. The
Well,
people
I
on
don't have a
Zoom.
mask, that's why they don't hear.
Thanks, Kathy. Kathy Swift is a member of the Finance Committee, so she's doing,
Sorry, it's on in the car.
sorry about that, we forgot.
Okay. You said you had an 89,000 shortfall, but 87,000 in grants. That's cool. It's only 2,000. And you have 287,000 in assets, but it's even more than that, 495,666. How is it that you can have a high asset number when you're giving away the offering?
Giving away the offering?
Giving away the offering?
Oh, the offering is not our pledge income. The offering is just what we collect here in church.
The loose dollars? that you people
Yeah,
give?
whatever they put in the plates,
Okay.
some of us give online.
Right.
But that's completely outside the budget.
Okay, so there's
So,
pledged and
There's-
there's
right.
yeah, okay.
Every year, each one of us says, I'm going to give $1,000 over the year, or whatever it is we're going to do.
Okay.
And that's the bulk of, and I think I have that later.
Okay.
That's about 87%, I think, of the,
All right. Oh, the only other thing that concerns me is you sort of mentioned that the finance committee is taking a line by line and going kind of low on inflation, or staying the same?
we're
protecting-
using the last 12 months inflation rate.
Yeah, that's, okay, well, I'm from outside, I just started here.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, we could go with last month's and assume that it's going to go even higher. We kind of take a middle ground philosophically when we're doing a budget. I mean, the budget is kind of freezing this month for the next year, but this is sort of why I said it's a guess, because the world doesn't end if we go over budget or under budget.
Yeah, with that much assets, you're not gonna be in a problem. anyway.
Exactly. So it's our best, responsible, prudent,
All right.
value-laden,
Sorry about it.
okay? No, I'm so glad you asked. Okay, so the personnel budget, that's the biggest, that's our number one expense, and I think later in the actual numbers, we've got what percent, but I think it's 67% of our budget is personnel, something about like that. So the first thing the Personnel Committee does is review internal equity. So internal equity means if we have 4 staff members that we're applying the same standards to each one of those for what their performance looks like, what their pay looks like, how we derive those things. So that again, you know, fairness is one of our values, so we want to make sure that that's correct. Then we review the UUA, Unitarian Universalist Association, for anybody new. They publish job descriptions, they publish salary ranges, and then they adjust them for geography, so you can kind of like, that's where we belong for every position. So we take our job descriptions, match them to what the UUA says, and then we adjust our salaries to match as close as we can, given what our pledges are and things like that. We do not purchase insurance for our staff. We have what we call salary in lieu of insurance. And so we increase their salary by the equivalent of what it would cost them to purchase covered California insurance as an individual. And we do it granularly enough that we may match their age, all of those things that go into an insurance calculation. We do that, or rather, I would say, I think David Henkel does it. I think he's the one that actually gets in there and digs around and does that. So thank you, David. And so he gets those insurance rates. I'm going to tell you, this year, there was some special legislation that reduced what the cost would be out of pocket. But if we reduced that, it would, in essence, reduce our staff's salary. And we're not doing big increases. You can see at the bottom, the average increase is 3%. So we felt it would be fair to just keep that and not bounce their insurance around, because it's going to go right back up after that. It's a short-term program is over. So all our staff are looked at using the same 4 criteria rating system. 1, knowledge, skills, and ability. 2, education and experience. 3, their longevity here at UUCV. And 4, their performance in their job this year, over the past year. Not, you know, if they had a bad year last year, we're not counting that, we're just counting this year. So then we calculate everybody's rate on the UUA scale, and then we talk about it, look at what we think is going to be the revenue, income, and where we are with people, and then we kind of come to the middle. We didn't go to the highest possible rate. I mean, if you've ever been an employer, you tend to aim at the middle, just because it's really hard. You know, if you're the top employer, that means you want to be super, super competitive, and that's the only reason to do that. Then we recommended final rate and hours. So sometimes we change the number of hours somebody works. In one case, we had somebody just below the number of hours that it would take to earn the pension, which we felt looked awfully suspicious, that we're trying to keep this person from, you know, if somebody looked at it from the outside, they'd say, you're trying to keep this person from, you know, it's a fairly big expense to give them in the pension, but it's also in line with our values to make sure people are protected for their futures. So, yes, there we go again. Why don't you just sit over here?
Well, I can talk loud enough.
Well, we're also going virtually, so I want to make sure people are here.
We're getting,
You would.
we're getting
Sorry.
exercise here.
My question is, you pay a pension, do you also go pay into Social Security for the employees?
I would have to guess. Yes, we do.
Okay. great.
Yeah, we do.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm a gerontologist, so Social Security is supposed to be a three-legged stool of savings, Social Security, and pensions. That's how it was envisioned in 1935. So we're trying to cover two of those legs, because we're not, I mean, our people don't earn huge salaries, for sure. So our average increase as it came out was 3%, which, as Reverend Dana explained to us last year, and I wasn't involved in doing the budget last year, so I wasn't aware, but they gave a pretty big increase to the staff last year. So it's a little bit of big last year, a little bit less this year. Okay? The pledge budget, so just a little process, and Brian can correct me if I'm wrong or left something important out. The generosity team mailed packets to everyone. Ours got lost in my husband's inbox in a big pile of stuff that he moved when the housekeepers were coming. So then they sent emails around to people to remind them. So, we found that, and then did our pledge card. After a couple more weeks, they started doing phone calls to people who hadn't responded. After all that effort, 77% of people who have a history of pledging or are full members have now confirmed their pledge. The people who have not responded are historically solid pledgers. We budgeted them at no change to their current pledge. Overall, the total pledge income increased 7%. There were a few people who couldn't continue a pledge at all. I think last time I looked at the numbers, it was about 30 people or so who just kept their pledge the same. Many more people increased their pledge. The average increase was over the suggested 14%. So when you put all of that together, it comes to the total income increased by 7%. And the way it worked out, we qualified for the full $50,000 from the legacy fund that has been discussed before. So the way it worked out, we have that 50,000, we have all of the pledges, and now we're going to look at our year-to-date projections, and then we'll get into the actual numbers. So when you project on year-to-date, it was a tough year to project on. So the building wasn't open for much of the year. Programs are just starting to come back after COVID. A lot of categories had zero spending. Most of the rest of them were way underspent compared to the budget. So we had carried forth a pre-COVID budget into COVID, and therefore we're way underspent. So some of those numbers we continue to keep, especially in the program. The continuing expenses like building and grounds and things like that, we've increased. Employees continued their current service levels. The year isn't over yet, so as I said, we projected. And then I don't know if anybody else did, went back and looked at, like, what are the last 3 months invoices for cleaning and security, those kinds of things, because they've been a little crazy. The lease on the copier, all of those things we looked at. And then what you do with your current is you pull out anything that was an extraordinary purchase that will not be repeated. So all the AV equipment that we had to do, that's done. It's over. It's great. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Kitty. So we pulled out things like the hybrid Zoom in person, and we had new security cameras outside, and things like that. Questions? Questions? Okay. So this is the proposed budget. Overall, the upper left-hand corner, can you see that? I can make it even bigger. Bigger? I think I can make it bigger. Oh, no, maybe I can't make it bigger. It's a PDF, so you can come up and stare at the screen. You could just stand around the screen and look. Sorry about that. So as I said, average 3% pay raise. We got the latest update on pledge figures as of May 12th. Our expenses are either as requested or based on the actual for the year, with the process of taking out the non-repetitive. And then we did our CPI, Consumer Price Index assumption, at 8.5% inflation, which was the past 12 months, okay? Our budget is so sweet. It has so many lovely UU sounding categories. So income is called funding the mission, which I love. So we kept that in. 87% of income, oh, I remembered that right. Last year's budget was 352,000-ish. And I tend to do round figures. I'm not going to, I take out all, I get rid of all cents. But I'm not going to give you the ones and twos either. So the current fiscal year is about 352,000. The proposed budget is 371. This is pledge commitments, and the change was an increase of almost $19,000. I'm going to tell you, the pledges was the number we got from Brian for generosity for the pledges, plus Reverend Dana says there are 5 new members that are about to go through the signing up, and there are other people in process. So we do have some new members coming up, so we put in a $100 a month pledge for those people, just to kind of build us up a little bit. We think it's realistic. The Finance Committee discussed all of these things. Reverend Dana talked to us about it, and so that's what we came up with, the total pledges plus about $6,000 for those 5 new members and the other new members that will be coming up. The other new members won't be 12 months of the year. These new members will be 12 months of the year. Other income, donations, income for use of the building, all of those things, legacies, that kind of thing. The current budget was $44,000. The budget that we're projecting is $56,900. This year was way over that. So what we did was took the average, more like a historical level, what we've seen this year, and came in the middle. Again, because we thought it was responsible to do that, but I can show you the detail if you want to see exactly what it looks like later on. So we have a 31,000 total increase in the budget. This is not compared to what happened this year. It's compared to the last budget you approved as a congregation. Again, and the expenses, so programs and staff are 73% of our total expense. And then we have building and administration and a couple of other expenses like the UUA dues and things like that. So last year we budgeted 351, almost 352,000. This year we're budgeting about 368, so about a $16,000 increase. And that's, there's the 3% increase on salaries. So that's a chunk of change. I think it's about that entire $16,000 is staff. So we had 2 people going on to pension that weren't on pension before. We had a 3% increase, an increase in hours for just by 2 a week. So it's not a huge difference. So that essentially is what it came from. The building and administration, so what we did was we said, if we look at current, it's going to be an underestimate. So what we did generally was increase it by, I think, 50% over, you know, like a 50% change between the old way and the new way. Did just about halfway, which 8.5% inflation plus increased usage of the building, more heating, more water, more cleaning, all of those kinds of things. So the building and administration increased budget over budget by $6,500. Our other expenses went down, partially because we did some recalculating of where things went in the budget, which I can also show if you want. So our total expenses went up $16,000. Our income budget, but remember, we budgeted an $89,000 deficit. So just because there's not a huge change between last year and this year doesn't mean that we're budgeting a positive bottom line. So our operating budget deficit went from 89,000 down to 74,000. So we've done $15,000 better in our operating budget. And we don't have the grants we had last time. This spreadsheet didn't have one of the grants included. So it's a little different from the 87,000 I said earlier. But we do have our $50,000 from the legacy fund, and that gives us a total deficit, bottom line, of minus 24,000. And as we saw, we've got $500,000 kind of in the bank. So while we're rebuilding, revisualizing who we are after COVID, because people say, I want things to go back, but nothing ever goes back to what it was. We will never be the same as individuals. We'll never be exactly the same as a church. So what we're trying to do is rebuild, and a deficit, if we have to draw on our savings, the deficit will be an investment in what we hope will become a new UUCV that operates in a responsible and high-value way. Next slide. So like I said, we made some tough decisions on the Finance Committee, pre-COVID, post-COVID, during COVID, due to cessation of a lot of programs. But we have in the past had a couple of kind of insurance lines in the budget, one of which was $10,000 for major maintenance kinds of items. We only budgeted $2,500 this year. And a minister's sabbatical fund, which Reverend Dana assures us that what we currently have set aside is enough for now. So we didn't budget anything in that, but those are both categories that we want to be able to fund totally if we can. So we're basically proposing a resolution that if, as we expect, there are surplus funds, and we didn't correct this, at the end of June 2023, not 2022. So after all of these guesses and plans and educated guesses we did for this budget for the new year, if after all of that it turns out to have been, and then a miracle occurred, like my favorite cartoon about the formulas, then we will fund the full amount of those 2 items that we repressed in this budget, which would mean an additional $7,500 goes into the major maintenance fund and $2,000 goes into the sabbatical fund. And I think, c'est ça, that's the end of the presentation. So you can, oh, thank you. Thank you. I don't have a skirt on for my curtsy, but. So I'll get out of that. Questions? Anybody want to roll through all the detail? Um, Yes, sir. Microphone.
Sorry.
New blood, it's so wonderful, isn't it?
It's old blood.
New old blood then.
You mentioned that you didn't include the 87,000 grant and the 50,000 grant in this?
No. There's what we call the operating budget,
Okay.
which is kind of the stuff we can anticipate. That's building, administration, the copier, the staff, all of those things do not, that's sort of above the line. So those are our operating expenses.
Okay.
And then below the line of operating expenses, we put the $50,000 transfer from our legacy fund to cover the expenses that we felt we needed to continue, but that we couldn't responsibly cut at a time when we're trying to rebuild the church.
Okay. And you mentioned the UUA dues. Is that something that's needed in order to qualify for the 50,000 or the 87,000?
No,
Okay.
that is, we are a member of a movement.
Right.
And so we budgeted the whole amount that was calculated as our share of continuing the Unitarian Universalist movement in the United States.
Okay. All right. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And there is value that you get from that when a church has problems. And we're investing in other churches when we do that. So if a church has problems, they get free consultation, they get a lot of services from the association and from our local district. Yes, sir.
Is that based on
Oh, sorry. I shouldn't look like I'm listening until you're,
The donation that goes to the UUA
yes.
from our congregation, is that based on a per member?
It is
like
now a percentage of our budgeted expenses, I believe.
It's not based on congregation size?
It used to be, but it is not
Oh, I see.
anymore.
Do you know what that percentage is? I'm just curious.
I don't,
No? Okay.
sorry. David, you know?
May I ask that another way? We budgeted last year 24,500 for the UUA annual fund. Is that going up in the coming budget year?
Yes, it will be
Thank
26,000
you.
something, which was, we get a letter from the UUA. They calculate based on a formula that includes our geography, the last time we reported in on our budget size. Okay? Anything coming in on the
What did you say it was last year?
24,000 and change? This year it's 26,000 and change.
No questions.
No questions from Zoom? Anybody want to see anything more? Lunch? Wine? Okay. I guess, Yukio, you can close the meeting.
Well, I'm a little bit surprised we're going to have more questions, but that's fine. That means Sandy's done an incredible job of explaining. And you can see that there's a tremendous amount of work, details, information that Sandy had to kind of process to come up with this, and she created the PowerPoint. And of course, the finance team, other members of the budget team, generosity team, the board will be processing all of this. So there's, we talk about it takes a village. Well, it really does take a lot of people to really go through this process. And so I know the generosity team this year had trust as one of the themes. And so really the congregation does need to give its leadership some trust and credit for going through all of this. So thank you very much, Sandy. That's great. As I mentioned before, the budget has not been finalized. Any comments that we receive will be shared with the board. The board will consider all of this at its next meeting and then come up with a final version that will be presented to the congregation at the annual meeting. Yes.
the date of the next board meeting?
The 19th, May 19th, And actually, we rarely advertise this, but anyone is welcome to come to the board meeting. So if you're interested, let me know and I can send you the Zoom link. All of our meetings have been via Zoom. And then the annual meeting, I said, is on June 12th. So if there are no further comments or questions, we can close the meeting. And I do have some closing words, if I can find them. So these are closing words from Robin Gray. As we prepare to depart, we give voice to these hopes. May we know ourselves bound in community, even while we are apart. May a passion for justice burn in our lives. May we carry the light of compassion in our hearts and in our every interaction. May we be whole in our devotion to truth and always carry the lamp of peace before us. So thank you all very much for being here and enjoy the rest of your day.